Thank you, Lauren. Thank you all for coming. Today, I'm going to be talking about my current research project with the Department of Corrections, which is an intervention research project. I want to tell you how I got involved with this project. In 2015, I received a call from a colleague of mine, Mark Eddy, who was working at Partners for Children at the time as the director of research. As with most funding that's given by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, the turnaround time for writing their grants is really short. You basically hear about these grants overnight, and you either need to be doing something in the area specified in the RFP, because there really isn't time, quote, to get your act together to try to apply for funding, as I said, if you're not doing something in the area. And Mark and I were already working on a couple of things focused on children of incarcerated parents. One of these things was preparing for a special edition of the Smith College Studies in Social Work, focusing on children of incarcerated parents. At any rate, he said, this RFP is out, and I need you to sit down and help me to write this grant. And I said, and what is it I'm going to be doing in terms of this research? Because those of you who know me know that I don't just do my work for money. I have to have an interest in what's being done, and it has to fit in with my current and past research trajectory. And so he said, we want you to write a piece of this grant, and we want you to do research that focuses on mothers. And I got very excited about it because I thought I can fit this in with work that I had done for 8 years with mothers at Mission Creek Correction Center for Women. And we wrote the grant, we sent it in, and he called me up and he said, guess what? And I said, what? He said, well, we're going to get funded, but there's something that you're not going to like. And I said, what is that? And he said, the program officer says that you cannot do any research regarding mothers. And I said, are you kidding me? And he said, no, she said if we want this money, that part of the proposal has to come out. And so I always try to look at the big picture. And that's something that I've learned to do as I've aged and matured. And so I decided you can be narrow-minded and foolhardy and not work on this research project, or you can just go with the flow. And so I decided to go with the flow, thinking that it's a focus on fathers who I have never done research on. I know that fathers are important in the lives of children. However, they are not my area of interest. They're not. And so I thought, this is going to be a real challenge. The other issue is having worked with the Department of Corrections, focusing on mothers and children, and that effort was strictly volunteer work. It's a real challenge. And so I thought, I've never been to a male prison. with the exception of going to a federal prison in my home state. And that was like going to a country club. You've heard about these prisons that are like country clubs. Well, that's what this federal prison was like. And so I wonder, what is it going to be like for me to actually enter a state prison here in Washington? At any rate, this work began in October of 2015. And year one of the project was spent entirely planning what we were going to do, dividing tasks, and that sort of thing. And this past fiscal year was year two. And most of my time was spent writing a manual with my two colleagues, Mark Eddy and Jean Kilstrand from the University of Oregon. Mark is no longer at Partners for Our Children. He's at New York University. And so it's been a challenge to get the work done. He still lives in Oregon, but commutes to New York. And so everybody in here knows how challenging it is to try to plan meetings. We were supposed to have a meeting today about this work, and I told them I need to be at UW Tacoma and give a talk about the work, so we can't meet this afternoon. At any rate, last year, we actually began to start planning, how are we going to get this research done? And Mark and Jean are very interested in staff. And I decided this is a research project about fathers and about fatherhood. I actually want to talk to dads. And so we decided that I would do that since that was not what they were interested in. And so I submitted an application to the Human Subjects Review Committee in Seattle. And as most of you know in this room who are researchers, it takes a while to go through the process. And in addition to that, DOC has its own institutional review board. They don't think like I do. And so that was a challenge. To make a long story short, it took quite some time to get approval to finally get these focus groups done. So let me talk a little bit about exactly what reform is. Reform stands for Responsible Fatherhood Opportunities for Reentry and Mobility. And that's the federal name. It is not the name that we decided we would give our project. Actually, in addition to our little group and the state of Washington being awarded funding to do fatherhood research, there were also 4 other entities who received this funding. The Osborne Association in New York City, a group in West Virginia, a group in Ohio, and one in Kentucky. And all of those groups that I mentioned are private entities. So Washington State really lucked out in terms of getting this money and doing this work. Well, the first thing that was done after knowing that the grant had been funded, staff had to be hired. Because as I said, this is intervention research. And the researchers were not going to give these interventions to dads at the prison. And so that was kind of interesting. I didn't interview anybody, but I heard about it. But I subsequently, along with my colleagues, got to meet the people who were actually going to provide the interventions. And I have to say, my first meeting, I was a little put off. One of the things that we wrote in this grant was to actually do post-release work with these dads once they are released from prison. And that's something that has not been done before. Typically, if a person is incarcerated, they serve their sentence and they're out, whether it's a dad or a mom, and no one follows up with them. And in order to maintain communication with these dads, we wrote in the grant that each dad would get a cell phone when he was released from prison. And at our first meeting with staff, one of the women said, I don't understand this, why you people wrote in to give these men a cell phone. Don't you know that we're talking about people who have been selling drugs, using drugs, doing all sorts of things. And this is my tax money that's being used for these cell phones. So I looked at this woman and I said, back up. First of all, this is not your money. This money is coming from the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families. It's not yours. These phones are to help you to maintain contact with these dads, and they're basically to help you do your job better. That particular person is no longer working with this project. So I said that to let you know that there have been some challenges along the way. But we're moving forward. We're going into year 3 of the project. So I want to talk a little bit about the scope of the issues as it relates to the growth in the prison population. As everyone in here knows, the US continues to incarcerate more people than any other country in the world. And this is not stopping, it's continuing. And I'm looking around, and one of my friends was supposed to be here from Seattle, and she's not here. And I was hoping that she was going to be here because I'm in the midst of writing my next op-ed, and it's going to be focused on parents. And I will probably get arrested after I write it because I have some things to say that are not so good about the current administrator in the White House and the current Attorney General as it relates to incarceration of mothers and fathers. And I'm going to say what I want to say and send it to the Washington Post. And it will probably be published, but if they don't want it, I'll send it to the New York Times. And my whole point is that it's very problematic to continue to incarcerate dads and moms. It wreaks havoc on the lives of children. And here in Washington State, the prison population continues to grow. In fact, since 1990, the population has gone up by 67%. And a large percentage of these individuals who are being incarcerated are mothers and fathers. And we, especially as social workers, we need to do something about it. And as the public, we need to do something about it. People who are incarcerated face a number of challenges once they leave prison. And one of them is employment and trying to get some type of economic security. It's very difficult when you leave prison to get a job. It really is. And so as I continue to speak, I'm going to talk about some of these challenges. I'm going to talk about what this program is doing in order to help dads. And let me say, this is a volunteer program. Nobody is forced to participate in the program. I don't think that people should be made to participate in programs. Prisons have enough, quote, mandatory programs as it is. And so it's volunteer, and as I said, that's a good thing. The other thing that I want to point out in terms of challenges for people who are incarcerated and are released from prison, even those who are not parents, is finding a place to live. If you are incarcerated for a drug charge and released from prison, federal law stipulates that you cannot get Section 8 and go into public housing. And that's a tragedy for many parents who are released from prison. Where are they going to go? And so a part of this program is to actually help dads find a place to live when they are released from prison. And that's a part of the role of the case manager, to work with these dads around housing, which is a big problem. So there are three areas, or three issues that this program deals with. And the first one is responsible parenting. The next one is healthy relationships. And when I say healthy relationships, I'm actually talking about relationships with children, relationships with mothers of children. And what I have found in my work, and it's documented by other researchers, is sometimes people have children together and they don't end up continuing that relationship. However, when children come into the world, they have a mom and a dad. And so this program is focusing a lot on how do you successfully co-parent. You can co-parent kids without loving the mother of the kids. And what we're finding with a lot of these dads, they have multiple children because they've been in relationships with multiple women. And so it's a challenge to try and co-parent. So a large amount of time is spent around co-parenting. The other issue that we work on is education and employment. And I'm very pleased to say that this is a big deal for these fathers. And later on in my presentation, I'm going to be sharing some of the responses from focus groups that I did with dads. And it's a big deal to them to have somebody to actually sit down and plan with them. What am I going to do in terms of career goals when I leave here? And I was very pleased to see and to hear that these fathers actually have career goals and realistic career goals. The other positive thing in terms of education is the Department of Corrections, in terms of this particular grant, has partnered with community colleges to actually come in and teach these men. And so that's a plus. For those who don't have their high school diploma, they can get their GED. For those who do have a high school diploma, they can actually start taking college classes. And that's a very good thing because this is moving them towards economic security. So who is it and where are we doing this work? There are actually 4 correctional facilities that we are targeting. The Washington Correction Center, Cedar Creek Correction Center, Stafford Creek Correction Center, and Larch Correction Center. And to be perfectly honest with everybody in here, I had heard of these facilities, but I didn't know where they were. And so after I agreed that I was going to do these focus groups, and I thought, where is it I'm supposed to be going to actually do these groups? And I went online and I Googled where these places were, and I started doing the focus groups over the summer. And I ended up in the hospital. I had to go into the hospital. I had to have some surgery done. And I thought, and my doctor told me, you're not going to be able to drive to these places. One of the things that I've noticed in terms of my work with corrections and corrections facilities is they're not located on the beaten path. And because so much of my child welfare work is child focused, I'm always thinking about how is this affecting children? And so the program manager for our project arranged for DOC staff to actually take me to these 4 facilities in a state car, which was nice. And on these drives, I thought, we've been driving for over 2 hours to get here. How does this feel to a child to have to travel this distance to see a parent? Did anybody ever think about that? And obviously they don't, because these prisons are not in the city. You get to the little town, and then you've got to go way out in the country. And I think about kids, the one that I went to in Vancouver. Again, that's a very long distance. And I'm thinking about children who actually live in places like Spokane, who have to come over here to visit their parents. It's quite a challenge. The other thing that's come up, and I have to just put this out here, in all of the work that I do, I'm always looking at issues around race. And I looked at, for example, what the first cohort, which was 22 dads, there were not a lot of men of color in this cohort. And so that was a problem with me, considering what I know about who we're sending to prison. We're sending a large number of men of color, a large number of women of color, and this impacts families of color. And so I've been very cognizant about recruitment for the program. How are you recruiting these people? And it's one of the things that I discussed when I did the focus groups, and I'll talk about that later on. So that's been an issue for me. I also was concerned about the counties that were picked. for this program. I live here in Pierce County, which is, I guess, is considered diverse. I actually was shocked that Pierce, King County, were not target counties for this piece of research. And so let me find these counties, because you all probably know them better than I do. So these are the 4 counties: Thurston, Lewis, Cowicz, and Clark. How many of you know where these places are? Are these diverse places? You know, I just looked at the names and I thought, oh, I've never heard of this. Not that I've heard of every county in the state of Washington, but I thought, how many people of color would be living in a place, Lewis County? That just does not sound like a place where a large number of families of color would live. So who are we going to be targeting with this intervention? And that was a concern, and you know that I'm very assertive. When I have something to say, I say it. And so I brought this up at a couple of our research meetings. You know, you really need to expand the scope of this work. And I kept harping on this, and apparently other people who had nothing to do with the project, but who were powerful people at DOC brought this up. And I'm very pleased to say that Pierce County is now included in this work. And I think that's a good thing. So let us talk a little bit about who these people are, the staff who actually provide the intervention. And I have to say, currently we've got some really good people who are providing the intervention to these dads. The one thing that I'm not pleased about is the fact that there are no social workers who are, because I'm a social worker, and I know what social workers are trained to do, and I feel that they could really make a difference in this type of work. And so we have case managers, family service specialists, and the family services specialists are people who are actually contracted with the department to actually work with these men after they are released from prison. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Education and employment navigators, the recruitment and intake specialists. We have a management analyst, and the whole purpose of Martin is to actually collect data, do data analysis and that type of thing. And then we have the project manager for this particular project. And so, as I said, all these people right now seem to be doing a good job. The issue in terms of staff has been turnover. People have been hired, and they, of course, they're told what their responsibilities are during the interview, but then they realize that they have to travel to these prisons, and we're not talking once a week. We're talking several times a week. Sometimes it's in the evening to teach these courses. And for a lot of these people, they're married, they have young children, and this presents a challenge. And one of the probably best case managers for the program was a young man from Vancouver, and I heard nothing but rave reviews about him when I was doing my focus groups. But he resigned from his position because of the travel. I mean, can you imagine traveling from Vancouver to all these different prisons to get this work done? So that's been a real challenge. So let's talk about the criteria that dads have to make if they want to volunteer and be in this program. First of all, they have to have been tried and convicted as an adult. They have to be low income. They may be an expectant parent, a biological, an adoptive, or a step parent, or a parent figure of a dependent child or young adult up to 24 years of age. They can be a custodial or a non-custodial parent. They can be married or unmarried, cohabiting or non-resident parent. And then they must be within 3 to 9 months of release. Because if you really think about it, it really doesn't make sense to be in this program if you're going to be incarcerated for the next 10 or 15 years. It's just not feasible. So some other things that I want to say in terms of the target population. There are certain groups of people that simply are not going to be accepted into this program. For example, if you are a dad and you are in prison because of some type of sex offense, we do not accept you into the program. If you are an individual who has a history of domestic violence or child abuse, these particular dads are considered on a case-by-case basis, because we feel that just because there might be a history of domestic abuse, it doesn't mean that we need to write you off as a parent. What if this happened a long time ago, you've gotten some type of treatment for the issue, but again, there is a review board that looks at these cases. And this consists of a case manager, a representative from the Victim Services Program, a representative from the DSHS Children's Administration, and a behavioral and health sciences integration administrator. So it's a multidisciplinary team of people who are actually reviewing these cases on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's a good thing. This committee meets once a month to determine whether or not they think that this is somebody that we really need to give a chance in the program. So now I'm going to talk about what are these interventions? What are these people actually getting? Pre-release. We're utilizing a program called Parenting Inside Out. And Parenting Inside Out, I like it because first of all, it's evidence-based. And so I strongly believe in evidence-based practices. And this is a program that's worked. It's been tried, it's been tested. Input not only was received from people who actually have utilized it, but also parents. This program has been utilized by moms, dads who have been incarcerated. So Parenting Inside Out, like I said, is given prior to release. And one of the things that I was really struck by, and I have not utilized this program, but I read through the curriculum. And one of the things that stood out to me that I really liked that they utilize in this curriculum are these little bears. Every man who is in the program is given a bear when they start the curriculum. And this bear represents a child. And one of the things that Dad said to me when I was talking to them was, it was really hard to carry a bear around in a male prison, because once you get into the program and you're given this bear, this is your child. And you're responsible for this child 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so you have to think about, what do you do if you have a child? For example, when we go to work, we have to make arrangements for childcare. So if they're doing work release or some type of work program actually on the prison grounds, they've got to make arrangements for childcare. The other thing that they utilize in terms of for experiential things is a plastic egg. And this is for dads whose children have not been born yet, to actually teach about, this is what happens, when your wife, significant other is pregnant. Here's some things that you need to be thinking about. Those of you who have been pregnant in here, including myself, we go through kind of mood swings and stuff when you're pregnant. So we're not always the nicest people. And so dads need to be attuned to that. The other thing that I have up here is emotion coaching. And even though I have got post-release up here, some of the instructors are actually starting this in prison. And I think that's wonderful, because this is actually teaching you how to be attuned to your children's emotion, how to be attuned to children's feelings. And with a lot of dads, even though they have children, they don't know how to talk to children. And a lot of times this is because they didn't have a dad to talk to them. They didn't have anyone to teach them about parenting. And we tend to parent like we've been parented. We say that we're not gonna do it that way, but how many of you parent like your parents parented you? Raise your hand. So, emotion coaching, and again, you'll hear what the men have to say about that in a few minutes. One of the things that I want to say about it is there are actually 5 steps, and I'm actually going to read these to you. And I want you to just listen and think about what I said. All right. Emotion coaching relies on adult listening, patience, and it follows a sequence of 5 steps. And for anybody in here who's a parent, you know that you have to have patience raising kids. No matter how cute they are and how nice they are, you have to have some patience. And I have to say, my parents are deceased, but I think about myself and as a little girl, and I wouldn't be standing here today if they didn't have patience with me. So the 5 steps in emotion coaching are adult awareness of child's emotions, adult recognitions of emotions as an opportunity for intimacy and relationship building, adult empathic listening and validation of a child's feelings, adult assistance with emotion labeling. Children need to know, what is this? Why am I feeling this? Adult limit setting and assistance with problem solving. And a lot of parents don't know how to set limits. And I call it inconsistent parenting because you're sending mixed messages to your kids. And so, again, I think it's a good thing that they're starting to work on this prior to release from prison. So, healthy relationships. What are we doing to work with these men on healthy relationships? So we're utilizing a curriculum, and I'm actually going to pass this around so that you can actually look at it, called Walking the Line. How many people have heard of this? It's not my favorite, but what do they care what I think? But it's also not the favorite of quite a few of the dads that I talked to. And one of them said to me, you know, Dr. Harris, this walking the line, it's not evidence-based. He had gone online. He went to the evidence-based practice website, and you can actually go there and look up programs. And I explained to him, I said, no, it's not evidence-based, but it's a best practice. And what that means is it's worked for dads. So I want you to be just a little patient and go to your classes. So this is, Walking the Line is actually done with these dads while they're in prison. And then let's talk about these Gottman's 7 principles for making a marriage work. I'm not really sure, and I didn't have any say-so in selecting this curriculum. Marriage is great, but not every dad is married who's in prison. And so I think that they could have decided on something else. This whole 7 principles for making a marriage work stems way back to when George Bush was president. And he was really focused on, we need to get people married. That's going to make our country better. It's going to get us back to old family values. And I believe that people can have relationships, they can raise kids without being married. And so, again, I didn't pick these programs. So the 7 principles, and I'm going to tell you what they are. One of them is enhancing love maps. The next one is nurturing fondness and admiration. The third one is turning toward each other, accepting influence, solving solvable problems, overcoming gridlock, and creating shared meaning. So I'll leave that for you to think about. This 7 principles for making a marriage work is carried out over a period of 7 weeks, and it's offered in 2 4-hour sessions twice a week at each facility. Some other things that I don't have on my slides that I think that are very important that are given to these dads in terms of case management. The focus is on solution-focused case management, which is great. And then one of the things that dads have access to when they are released from prison is they can actually get one-on-one counseling. DOC has contracted with a group called Shepherd and Associates. I'm not familiar with them, but dads can actually get one-on-one counseling sessions. Not only dads, but whoever the co-parent, spouse, partner, whatever is, that person can also participate in the counseling. And I think that's a good thing for these dads and their families. And basically this program is all about relationship building. It's all about relationship building with your children. It's about building relationships with whomever is the other parent of your child. And it's also about building relationships with your case manager, because this is the person that you're actually working with while you're incarcerated. So I kind of mentioned early on something about employment and education, and the fact that these dads can take classes while they're in prison. And the instructors from the community colleges actually come into the prison to provide these classes to these men. One of the things that's done for every person in the program is they actually complete a formalized job-seeking skills program. And this is done prior to reentry. And in this program, they learn things like how to write a resume, how to write a cover letter, how do I actually go for an interview. And in terms of economic stability and economic mobility, some of the things that we take for granted because we're out here in, quote, the real world, dads have to deal with while they're incarcerated. Something as simple as reapplying and getting a driver's license. Dealing with child support, because unless the case manager is a really good case manager and actually talks to dads about child support, when you're incarcerated, the courts are still expecting you to pay child support. And there is a form that a dad or a mom can fill out to actually petition the courts to actually stop child support. But if that is not done, child support is accruing interest while you're in prison. And what happens to a lot of dads, they come out and they've got a $40,000 child support bill waiting for them. And how many of you can afford to write a check for $40,000 today? Raise your hand. And so that's going to hinder you from moving up in terms of your economic status, all right? So the role of the navigator is to actually work with dads around employment, around how do I get a job? What kind of job do I want? And I was really amazed to hear dads actually having a plan. And what I found was several of the men that I talked to, they actually had a real career. They were actually, for example, a man talked to me about being an electrician. He belonged to a union. So they've got something, some of them, that they're planning to go back to. And then one of the things that navigators have done is to actually talk to people about jobs that are happening, things that they can do that were probably not happening when some of them went to prison. For example, I mean, there are a lot of food trucks around right now. I love the food from these trucks that are here whenever they come. I'm out there. And so that's the business. And that's something that's viable. That someone can do without going to college or going to graduate school. And so the navigator helps to get dads work ready. So let me tell you a little bit about these cohorts. The initial cohort, as I stated, was 22 dads, and this was our smallest. One thing that I forgot to mention to you, this quote, name of the program, Reform. Staff did not like it. The dads did not like it. And so there was a contest via the internet to come up with a user-friendly name and something that was more family-friendly for this program. And so the name is Strengthen Families. And I like that. I think it's positive. Because when you think about reform, that has a very kind of negative, pejorative connotation. But Strengthen Families sends a positive message. So since Strengthen Families started in July 2016, a total of 212 fathers have enrolled in the program. Of these dads, 34 have successfully completed the program. 146 are actively participating, and 32 have partially completed the program, but discontinued prior to full completion. Some of the dads decided it wasn't a good fit for them. Others infracted in facilities. And it's very easy to get an infraction in a facility. And the day that I did focus groups at Stafford Creek, 2 of the men who were supposed to be in my focus group were not there, because they had been referred to the work release program. And so they were actually working. But I was told that they were going to get an infraction because they were supposed to be there to participate in the focus group. And to me, that's kind of conflicted. You know, you're working here around employment and education. They've been referred to work release and they're out in the community working. That to me was more important than my focus group. But again, I don't work for the prison, so I don't think like they do. And so I just thought that was very punitive. The goal of the program is to actually have 10 to 15 fathers participating each quarter in the program at each of the 4 facilities. And again, this program is still basically new. I mean, we've just now started data collection. There's data that's been collected, but it's primarily how many people who are in the program, who are they, what's their race, what's their ethnicity, how many kids do they have, and this has basically been for federal reporting purposes. So let's talk a little bit about these focus groups. I did them at each of the 4 facilities, and one of the questions that I asked was, what are the things that attracted you to this program? And again, this is initial analysis. So just bear with me here. But one of the themes that came out was parenting. And so I want to tell you some things that the dads said. I got into the program to be reunited with my kids. I'm a first-time dad and wanted to learn different skills on parenting. I never raised a child before. I want to break the cycle of children of incarcerated parents ending up in prison. A lot of us never had a father figure, but want to break the cycle of kids not having a dad. I got a responsibility. I got a child I have to raise. So they were also asked, what are the skills that you have developed from participating in the program? And the big theme that came out was better communication. I talked to my kid more. I talked to her mom more. I have more interaction with my children, more interaction with my co-parent. I learned how to talk to my co-parent. I talk more. I end up crying when I started talking about my child. Crying is like taking your soul to the laundromat. And that actually really stood out with me. Given me the strength to get a hold of her family and try to connect with my son. Communication with her better. We need more one-on-one with our case managers. Being and seeing my case manager to work with me and to talk to us. We need more video visits with our children. I learned how to better communicate. I have not put it to use with my kids, but with my step-parents. Communication was never big with my parents. They never told me they loved me. I am able to say, I love you to my kids since being in the program. I need to have one-on-one with my case manager to learn about resources to better myself. So then I asked them, do you feel your Parenting Inside Out Walk the Line instructor was a good listener, was a good communicator, worked well with you, was helpful to you? In what ways? And the main theme that came out here was teaching style of these instructors. He did a good job of including everybody in the class. He held us accountable without putting anyone on the spot. He was not judgmental. He was humble, real passionate in his teaching technique. He did not browbeat us. He was understanding, not policing us like DOC. His teaching style was very demanding. He was a browbeater. Blank would belittle and talk down to people. He was talking down to certain people and was disrespectful. He acts like he knows everything, and he doesn't. I learned how not to over-discipline. He used his personal parenting experience to help us learn material. He went out of his way to make sure we understood material. He went out of his way to listen and reiterate what was said. And then they were asked, what parts of the program promote interaction between you and other fathers in your class session? And the major theme that came out here was about those teddy bears. This bear teaches us about responsibility. My bear is my daughter. I talk to this bear like I talk to my daughter. My relationship with my daughter is amazing. She has a big attitude for such a little person. She is 3 going on 40. I am responsible for this bear 24/7. At first, I'm worried about what other guys would say about me carrying a bear around all the time. Once they understood the purpose, it made them respect us for what we are learning and doing to be a good dad. It is kind of interesting because having this teddy bear makes me feel like a kid in some ways. But I realize I'm a father who is totally responsible for this bear who is my child. This bear has helped me to realize that I want to be the best dad in the world. My kids mean everything to me. I do like everybody in my class. The bears make us hold each other accountable. It is a tough setting. Carrying a bear around, people think it's funny. It's about the relationship with my daughter, and they do not understand. Carrying this teddy bear opened my eyes to priorities and responsibilities of a father. And then because we're focusing on education and employment, I wanted to know something about their navigators. And so posed basically the same questions. Do you feel your navigator was a good listener, was a good communicator, worked well with you, was helpful to you? And the major theme that came out was career goals. When I first came into the program, I had no goals. They helped me establish a release plan. My navigator gave me resources about the union. My navigator is an extra benefit of the reform program and helped me to redefine my plans for work when I am released. Tells us what is available to us through the program and contact persons in the community when we are released. Teaches about opportunities you would not know about. Works with us on breaking the cycle of incarceration by helping us learn job-seeking skills through mock interviews, writing resume, cover letters. We can also get our GED if we have not graduated from high school. So now we're going to show you a little video. And the dads in this video are in the program. They weren't in my focus group, but they are in the program.
If you can introduce yourself to us.
My name is Derek. I'm 32 years old. Okay, I gotta redo that. My name is Derek. I'm 32 years old.
My friends call me Ran. Some of my friends call me Big Ran. You can just call me Ran.
I have been in prison now for 12 months. 5 months.
I have been in prison for 87 months.
Some people have called me a career criminal.
People call me Lay.
People would call me a thug for coming to prison, but to my daughter and my other children, I would be their best friend, dad.
Or my kids call me Dad.
I'm the father.
My kid calls me his hero.
So tell me, guys, what makes a good father? What does a good father look like? Dependable. Shows love.
Good communication.
I think dads in prison understand the significance and just how important it is to be a good dad. I think they just either don't feel like they're up to the challenge or that they even deserve the challenge. It's just they almost like they want to fade away.
I think you have to install the morals in them, and the traditions are like a softer thing you give them. they might take your traditions and enjoy them as a memory of you, but their morals are the severity. That's the serious thing of it.
First time I see my daughters in here, I cried like a baby. That's one of my main motivators, was knowing that who she feels attracted to or what she pulls into her life will depend on who I am as a man. What makes it work the best was the way we came in and we were open with each other. And so we have to lean on each other. There's guys that have support and there's guys that don't have support. It's allowed for us to teach each other.
You know me looking in the eye right now, so all right, so let's take some time really quick, guys. The Strength in Families program is new. It's funded through the Department of Health and Human Services reentry grant called Responsible Fatherhood Opportunities for Reentry and Mobility. So in short, that's the reform grant, and with that funding, we've launched into the implementation of the Strength in Families program. There are three primary areas that we focus on in the Strength in Families program. One is positive parenting. The second is healthy relationships, whether that's with a co-parent or a partner. And then the third is economic stability as well as mobility. Particularly in here, it reminds them that they are a person and that they are a human being and that they're not broken. And so that, again, empowers them to take control over their life or start leading their life in a better direction. But the purpose of the program isn't necessarily to glue families back together again. Safety is absolutely critical, and the safety and the well-being of kids and co-parents is at the forefront of what we're considering as we're implementing the program.
The most consistent thing in life is change. I think if you just commit to it, you know what I'm saying, everything will work out.
So I think the answer for you is...
These are all of these guys that are now trying to be good men, trying to be good fathers. And so I see that growth in them, and I also see that they can continue to grow. I see that there's still more growth to be done, but I see that they're ready for it.
Commitment, or actually a video on commitment.
I feel relieved, nervous.
I feel scared and excited at the same time and anxious.
But about my release, the number one feeling I feel is ready.
This ends my presentation. Are there any questions?
If you have a question, I'll bring the mic to you because we're recording, and that way your question will be recorded.
This is a little question. I don't need.
You prefer not to?
So the one person is a peer educator. How do you pick? How are they selected? You know what I mean? The prisoner.
The prisoner, they're selected by staff. And when I say staff, I'm talking about program staff, not prison staff.
Uh-huh.
And it's typically something that they volunteer for. Two of the men who were in focus groups that I conducted told me that they were in line to be peer mentors / educators.
Hi.
Hi.
How much traveling did you do? I mean, in terms of, I'm trying to get a sense of how much energy and time and whatnot.
How much traveling do I do?
Yes, yes.
For this project, more than I would like, because nobody wants to meet here at UW Tacoma. And so I've been the researcher on the team who drives to Tumwater. And it's like, I consider it a blessing when the team will agree to meet in Tumwater. I think it's a curse when I have to go to Vancouver. And so typically what I do, and there is money allocated in the budget for travel, and Terry Simonson can tell you, I have never used in the 2 years since we started my travel allowance. Anyway, it's a lot. And going to these prisons, fortunately, as I said, DOC staff put me in a state car, which is great because I don't want to put all these miles on my car. I think that there's probably going to be more travel in year 3 because one of the things that we're already talking about is scope of work for year 3. And for me, it's going to be doing focus groups with dads who've been released from prison. I have no idea where they live, and I have to be honest, I'm not afraid of dads, because when I did my focus groups, I did them in a room with the dads by myself, and I wasn't afraid that something was going to happen to me. Interviewing out in the community makes me a little uneasy. I know that some dads are in, I think they call them halfway houses, before they transition into independent living. So I will be comfortable going to that type of place. If I'm going to have to go to somebody's home, I'm not going to go there by myself. I will demand that they put me in a state car, but it's a lot of travel.
Are you hoping that maybe one of the prisoners will end up in Hawaii?
I mean, I would love to fly to Hawaii, or that would be great. Other questions?
Hello. So out of the 4 prisons, what is the, numbers of those individuals that are actually participating compared to the ones who are...
Okay, ask me your question again, Joseph.
How many people are participating in the program out of each prison? Do you have an average number, or, because you said it's selected?
So far, I would probably say like 10 to 15 from each of the 4 prisons.
And then with that, is the numbers growing because the word is spreading?
Numbers are growing because prisoners, the ones who've gone through the program, are actually talking to others about it. And of course, these bears generate curiosity. You know, what is this about? What is the purpose of this bear? What do you like about the program? And one of the things, and I didn't talk about this, but when I was doing the focus groups, I asked dads, what do you think is the best recruitment method for the program? And they said us. And I agree with them, because I think that the numbers have been low, because recruitment has been done by staff. And because it's a new program, they're skeptical of, what is this? How much time is going to be involved? And one of the issues that's come up, there have been conflicts between being in the program and then being involved in other required activities at DOC. Because when you're incarcerated, you can't just sit around. They have programs, and I have to say, Washington has some really good programs that are already on the books for incarcerated individuals. And so some men are in these programs, but then, you know, they hear about this program, or like the dad who told me that walking the line was not evidence-based. He actually went online to the Children's Bureau website, looked up the grant number, read about what the goals were from the federal government, and then looked at, this is what they say they're going to do. I want to be in this program. Other questions?
Just a quick question. How long do you hope to have evidence for outcomes, like positive outcomes? Because that's going to be great for research.
The program is 5 years. And so, as I told you, data collection is just starting. And so I'm hoping at the end of the in fact, I know at the end of the 5-year period, we'll have lots of data. Because I would really like to just sit down and crunch some numbers, because I do that too, to put with these focus group responses. Hi.
I may have missed this, but do you guys, is this program offering the teachings in different languages?
No, it's just in English.
For fathers who don't speak English?
Well, so far, no one has volunteered, because it's strictly a volunteer program, who is non-English speaking. But you know what? When we have our next team meeting, I'm going to bring that up. Because I know that one of the men, and I don't know what his ethnicity is, and this is just based on me looking at him and his accent. I don't think that he was born in this country, but he's also he is fluent in English.
Dr. Harris, how are you?
I'm just fine.
Good. I have a question about the research here, and I know you have worked with child welfare, and
yes.
I have volunteered with Dr. Hackett for the last 4 years, and we visit youth at Green Hill School.
Okay.
And so their recidivism, when they leave there, unfortunately, they just graduate right into the penal system. And some of them are never going to leave the system. They're going to be there till 2096, one young man told me. And it's like, if you live so long. So will your research in any way inform services to these young people to keep them out of the system, to change their lives around, to impress on the various systems that impact their lives, because they all come together at one point, around services, around family, around all of these pieces of their lives that they miss because they are incarcerated?
Well, any piece of research that I do it to inform practice and policy. And so this research, because it's still new, I have not written about it. But I'm writing about children of incarcerated parents, and have written about that. I teach about that here at our school. But getting back to my own work, I don't know because I really do not do a lot of work around adolescents, but child welfare and kids in the child welfare system. And my focus right now, other than this research project, is on children of incarcerated parents.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 books that are coming out in 2018, and they're both on children of incarcerated parents. So the young people can certainly read these books. I mean, what I would say, and there is a young man who was in one of my focus groups who told me that he was at this facility.
Mm-hmm.
He was at this facility, he was released, he got married, his wife became pregnant, he committed a crime, and he's now in one of the facilities. He's 20 years old. I mean, that's a very young person to be into his 2nd incarceration. But he's the young person who said he didn't have a dad as a role model. And so he's going to be a dad to his child. And we can only hope that he's serious about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for people, young adolescents who are incarcerated, one of the things that's worked for them has been having a mentor, either in the facility or outside the facility. And because a lot of adolescents don't have a dad in the home, some don't have a mom in the home, because with some of these young people, both parents are incarcerated. And incarceration rates for parents, it's on the uprise.
Just one comment and one question. How you doing, Dr. Harris?
Hi.
Great program. Thank you for what you're doing.
Sure.
The second question, you mentioned how another gentleman got in trouble. Is DOC looking at restorative justice methods or something for those that's in this program that's trying to help them instead of just throwing them back into the system?
I have, and I'm going to be very honest. I don't know what DOC's line of thinking is. And I say that because my work in terms of DOC is strictly limited to work with Carolyn House-Higgins, who's the program manager. I have had access to, and it's because I know these people, Jody Becker-Green, who is a deputy secretary for DOC, and I know her from the Children's Administration because of my child welfare work. One of the things that I can say about DOC as it relates to this program is they've become a little more family friendly and a little more family oriented. My one issue about DOC is in all of the male prisons that I've been in and the 2 female prisons, and as I said, for 8 years, we did this family reunification group at Mission Creek. I only know one social worker who works at the Washington Correction Center for Women, and she's a graduate of our MSW program. Rachel is the only social worker that I know, and that's not the case in prisons outside of the state of Washington. And so I don't know what the issue is in terms of hiring social workers, because the people who are, quote, who have the title counselor, who work in prisons, these are not people with a social work degree or even a counseling degree, yet, you know, they have that title. And so my answer to that is that we as social workers need to advocate because social workers need to be working in prisons. And they're doing it outside of the state of Washington.
Who's teaching the classes to, like,
7 principles of making marriage work. It's being taught by case managers. If it's taught post-release, someone from Shepherd and Associates. And again, I'm not familiar with them. There are some shop in this area, but I don't know like who I'm assuming, and it's an assumption on my part, that they do have some type of professional training. But don't quote me on that. But I can't imagine that DOC is contracting with somebody to provide counseling that does not have some type of credential.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Harris again.
Thank you all for coming, and I want to say a special thanks to a couple of people here. A big thank you to Dr. Marcy Lazari, because Marcy is the person who recruited and hired me. And I think it's a blessing, but when it starts raining, as you know, and it's dark, I start complaining, why did I leave my home in Chicago and come out here to this place? And then there are these two people, Ted and Billy Johnstone. Ted was actually on the advisory council when I came for my job interview here. And Billy, I met her subsequently, and I did my job talk right in this room, believe it or not. And she came up, take this job. So it's been good. I actually, in terms of my work, I'm proud of the work that I've done because it's changed the lives of so many kids and families, and that's what my work is all about. It's just really important to me to make a difference in the lives of children. And when people ask, well, why do you do this work? Even when I was in my doctoral program and I gave the topic of my dissertation to my committee, and one of the people on my committee said, why do you want to study these substance abusing women? You need to study children. And I called my mother and I said, Dr. Miller is saying that I need to study children. I don't want to study kids. And my mother, who was really smart and always gave me good advice, said, you tell that man you are studying women because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. And I didn't say it like that because I wanted to get my PhD. I was politically correct, and I said it in a very nice tone. But he now says to me when I go back to Smith, you're doing great work, and I'm so proud that you stood your ground with me about your dissertation, because it's laid the groundwork for all of my other work. So thank you all for coming, and have some refreshments.